An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6. Chapter 24. Sansa. Gently stroking the large scales of the beast's snout, Rhaegal's warm skin was welcome to Jon in the harsh cold of the north. He shivered, almost feeling the same all-encompassing cold of death. It was shocking, emerging from that cold into a raging inferno. Among other, far more shocking things. "Come on, boy. You can do it." Jon gave the green dragon a smile. His affections for Rhaegal had only grown since he had held the egg in his hands all those years before. "Give me a little flame." Cooing softly at his rider, Rhaegal opened his mouth, only for a puff of smoke and a cough to follow. He lowered his head, as if ashamed. Patting him reassuringly, Jon sighed. "Has it been like this since we returned?" "He was too weak when we returned from the north, my lord," Maester Aemon, sharing his fellow Targaryen's pain. It had been determined by the consensus that Jon's death absolved him of his oath to the Night's Watch. Finn had been voted Lord Commander, while many had settled for the title of Lord for Jon at the urging of Robb and Marjorie. The wounds have healed for the most part, but no fire has left him when the mutiny occurred. Jon nodded. Ghost had gone into a frenzy when Jon had died. Had Rhaegal been able to breathe dragon flame, Thorne and the others would have been charred to a crisp far earlier. "But there is nothing physically wrong with him," Davos implied, glancing at the Red Witch. The priestess had essentially become the spiritual advisor of Castle Black. Face impassive, Melisandre walked up to Rhaegal. Only few could approach the dragon's head without getting a snarl. Somehow sensing she was why Jon had survived, Melisandre was one. A dragon is intelligent and mystical. They bond to a rider for life, and his rider is clearly you, Jon Snow. But the dragon riders of old Valyria raised them from hatching. Without the one present from hatching, I doubt he will ever breathe fire. She shrugged. At least, that is my best guess. A deep chuckle was heard. "I never would have expected it." Tormund looked at the dragon that saved his life north of the wall. A heartbroken dragon. Though his people were setting up on the land Jon promised them, he came by Wintertown and the castle for supplies on occasion. "Somehow that doesn't often show up in the legends," Davos deadpanned. Laughing softly, Jon's hand stroked Rhaegal's jaw. The dragon nuzzled it gently. The sound of a single bellow of the horn caused Jon to instinctively reach for Longclaw. No one's ranging beyond the wall, and the wildlings are all here or dead. Tense moments passed as he waited for a second horn, and inevitably a third. The tension gradually passed as the southward lookout called out, "Open the gate!" In rode 3 mounted figures, 2 of them in armour. The other... Eyes wide and emotion rising, Jon stared at the third person. Tired, worse for wear, and shivering. Her bright and vibrant red hair made no secret of who she was. It can't be. But she was. Eyes zeroing in on the figure she hadn't seen since the Stark family was fully together all those years ago. Sansa's heart hitched. He was older, grizzled from fighting, but one close look proved him to be the same selfless Jon she remembered. She dismounted, the surrealness of the moment not keeping her from keeping a tight hold of her cloak. Ramsay didn't let her dress well, and she didn't have the ability to change it. Not a word needed. As soon as he was close enough, Sansa jumped into his arms. "Jon!" For the first time in years, she finally felt safe. "I missed you, brother." Jon just held her tightly. She had never been as close to him as Arya was. Yet he loved her all the same. "Sansa!" Looking up from Jon's tight embrace, the redhead's jaw dropped. There was Robb, alive and well. Jon let go of her for this. She ran into the awaiting hug from her second elder brother. "I thought you were dead!" Sansa couldn't stop the errant tears from falling now, so filled was she with joy at the unexpected bonanza found at Castle Black. Both her older brothers, alive and well, aged and hardened with pain and anguish of life, but alive nonetheless. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sansa tightly hugged Jon once more. After so long in hell, watching nearly everyone she loved die or be torn away, of enduring terrors she could never have imagined. All she wanted to be was with her family again. A loud grunting drew her attention. Yet what hadn't been a more cursory glance turned into near panic. Eyes wide, she broke from the embrace, backing away, terrified. In her emotion, she just hadn't noticed the large green dragon resting against the castle grounds. But she noticed now. What, John? What? A dragon? The beast cocked his head at her, curiously inspecting the humour that his rider was apparently close to. John sighed, guessing this was inevitable. Sansa deserved to know. Aye, a dragon. How is this possible? There is something you should know, Sansa. Meeting Jon's eyes, Robb knew what their brother wanted to have happen. It would devastate Sansa, most likely, but she both deserved the truth and could be trusted with it. We should be in private for this. While Brienne and Podrick watered the horses, the three of them entered Jon's quarters. Rising from her seat, Margaery Tyrell noticed the third person among the two brothers, Sansa Stark. They had met while her brother had been at the capital, a time long ago. She moved to hug her as one would a friend. From the expression on Robb's face, the family needed time alone. She nodded. You look famished. I'll have the cook make you a hot meal while I get you some warmer clothes. With that, she was out of the room. Out of nowhere, three bat-like shapes swooped down from the rafters above. Sansa shrieked while Robb only laughed. He'd gotten used to the game the little ones played. They banked around and all landed on Jon, chirping excitedly at their father. Jon extended his left arm as a perch to join on his shoulders. Used to Robb, they sensed a strange presence. One screeched at her. No! Jon scolded. Not Sansa. The dragon lowered its head, chastised. It took a comparative while for Sansa to overcome her shock. You have more dragons? There was no mistaking it. Resting on Jon were three dragons, small enough to clearly be infants. Smiling at his children, Jon nodded. Meet my children, Sansa. His voice dripped with love. He cared for his dragons unconditionally. Exactly as with Dany, his siblings, Ghost and Rhaegal. Still looking unsure and quite a bit scared, Robb couldn't help but smirk. They're a little dazed, but sweet in their own way. Trust me. They were generally kind to those close to Jon, and God's help anyone else, though. Let me introduce you. Girls, this is Sansa, your aunt. The dragon stared at her intently. Jon pointed to one with light blue scales and grey hues. This is Daenerys. After Aunt Lyanna, Sansa thought. He shifted to one with lilac scales and hues of silver. This is Rhaella. And last but not least, he patted the head of an orange dragon with streaks of red, is Sansenya, named after my sister. Heart-catching, Sansa felt sisterly love and past guilt both rise. I was such an ass to Jon. Yet he named a dragon after me all the same. She shook the thoughts away. While Sansa did intend to beg forgiveness, there was a pressing matter to attend to. I am touched, brother, she said sincerely, but I am still curious as to why you are in possession of dragons. It was so incomprehensible that it defied rational thought. Jon could sense Sansa's disbelief and turned away. She had been so relieved, beyond relief even, to see him after all these years. He couldn't stand breaking her heart with the truth. Noticing their father's discomfort, the dragons hooted and flew off of him to curl up on Ghost's back for warmth, as they were apt to do. The direwolf looked at the creatures and then went back to his rest. Sparing his brother the pain, Robb decided to tell her. Sansa, please sit. Taking a seat next to hers, he took Sansa's hand in his. Jon is not our brother. Blinking, Sansa thought she misheard. What? And at the seriousness in Robb's expression proved she had not. Don't say that! Robb had always been the closest to Jon, after Arya, of course. Don't tell me you've let Mother's lies get to you as well. He is our brother. Much as it touched him to hear Sansa defend their bond, Jon knew that he had to kill it. It is true, sister. I am not a Stark. Regardless of her furiously shaking her head, he pressed on. I am your cousin, son of Aunt Lyanna. Aunt Lyanna? If what he was saying was true, then at least they were still related, quite closely. If not father, Then who? It couldn't be true. It just couldn't. Sister, Rob said. Jon is the true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Aunt Lyanna. He is Jaehaerys Targaryen, the true heir to the throne. Gazing at Jon, tears in her eyes, she wanted to argue, but knew that at that moment it had to be true. Father lied to us, she murmured. You're not our brother. Openly crying, she ignored their pleas and fled out the door, needing to be alone. This is suicide, Your Grace. The Lannister shits have all their forces in Dorne. We can afford to be bold initially, but our main focus should be King's Landing. Leaving the defences of Meereen under-equipped will hurt. I wish I could say the North will rally to you, but I do not think they would revolt against the Boltons. Khaleesi, I advise against this. Biding our time and seeking alliances would be wiser. Closing her eyes, Dany felt a pounding migraine coming on. She had called the staff meeting of her advisors and generals to finalise plans for her long-awaited invasion of Westeros, but it had collapsed quickly into anarchy. Daario, Catelyn Stark, Jorah, Tyrion, Varys and a recently recovered Grey Worm all went at each other like arguing children, yelling and insults being thrown like arrows sailing back and forth. Sharing an annoyed look with Missandei, the interpreter grabbing her bronze-tipped staff and banging it on the stone floor. That got everyone's attention. Enough! The main goals are set. This is just to discuss details. Your Grace, please reconsider, stated Varys. Production on our special weapons have been slow, Your Grace, Daario confessed. The metallurgists of Meereen had acquired something rather new from Yi through Karth once Dany's forces had taken Astapor and Yunkai. The city fell before it could be used against her, and now was in the hands of House Targaryen. Daario and Barristan found it likely to be decisive in battle. We only have 15, but if we land the entire force in Dorne, we can destroy Tywin Lannister's army in a decisive battle. Not counting the Lannister forces out too easily, Naharos. An accusatory finger pointed straight at Tyrion. Catelyn seethed. If you wish to protect your father, I would sleep lightly lest you go through an eternal sleep. Lady Stark, you not speak in such a way in my presence, hissed Dany. There is no going back. We will land on Dragonstone while a smaller force will take White Harbour and march on Winterfell. Dismissed. One by one, the small council shuffled out. Lord Tyrion. The imp stopped, turning as his queen called his name. I would like a word in private with you. Soon it was just them in the map room, the unsullied guards waiting outside, and Saracen was tied to Dany's hip. They were safe. You don't approve of my plan, do you? In his time at King's Landing, Tyrion had seen every sycophant and bullshit artist tactic known to man or god. King Robert wanted nothing but the best of news, so as not to distract him from his pleasures, and Joffrey was often found literally killing the messenger. Daenerys was not such a ruler, and he vowed to not put on airs. No. He sat in the chair closest to her. While I would wait till we have more ships, that is not what concerns me. Why divide your forces? You should put everything into Dragonstone rather than risk Ramsay Bolton in the north. Closing her eyes, Dany remembered the feeling that last night with Edaron and Balerion. How she just knew Jon was alive and needed her. I appreciate your honesty, Lord Lannister, but I know why we must go about such tactics. Call it a queenly hunch. Tyrion wasn't arrogant enough to fancy himself a military genius tactician. Jaime inherited father's martial talents after all. As you wish, Your Grace. Entering the room of her children, a fair amount of time later, Dany leaned on the door jamb with a smile of happiness. The twins played happily on the floor, imagining they were Targaryen conquerors defending their realm. With the stress of it all, the planning of the invasion and the worry over Jon, her beloved dragon wolves gave her the peace and joy that she so longed for. Soon they noticed her. Mona! Rhaegar ran to her, hugging her skirts. I saw Kappa! Dany raised an eyebrow. You did? He nodded happily. Where? She was curious. We saw him, Arya explained, tossing her silver hair back with an annoyed look at her brother. In a dream, Muna. The same as mine. Almost. It warmed her heart that they had the same connection with their father as she did. Hugging them both, Daenerys got onto her knees to hold them close. Soon, my darlings. Soon we will see Kappa. A harsh crackle of the whip resonated through the air. Move, you dogs! The snarling command was then given in low Valyrian by yet another beefy overseer, this one Essosi. Packed together close in cattle pens, the shuffling mass of swarthy-skinned humans being proceeding forward. Cloak over her head, Arya Stark cursed under her breath. Welcome back to Westeros, she remarked sardonically, in words so low only her companion could hear her. To think the King's Landing that she had left was a paradise compared to this. Gendry Waters looked at the sullen faces of the onlookers at the port, then to even more sullen faces of the milling slaves. Snagging premier berths hammocks in the merchant ships from Braavos to King's Landing, they had both heard of the mass humanity and occasional hairless mammoth crammed into the holds below. And I thought slavery was banned in Westeros. Apparently not in Joffrey Baratheon's Westeros, Arya replied, spitting out the hated name. Be it Essosi denied the usual markets in Slavers' Bay after Daenerys Targaryen emancipated their slaves, Dornish prisoners taken in Tywin's goal to make Dorne howl, or ordinary Westerosi peasants impressed as bond servants by lords eager to escape the crown's high taxes, all enslaved at Joffrey's decree. He's on the top of my list. Be careful, Gendry hissed. Someone might be watching. Arya failed to argue back. He has a point. In the distance, one Dornish slave collapsed into the dust. Guards set upon him like vultures, whips and clubs brought to bear. When they finally dispersed, the man was completely still. His fate was likely better than when a young woman collapsed similarly, one overseer grabbing her by the hair and dragging her away. It didn't take much thought for Arya to picture what was going on. Not as many small folk as before, Gendry observed as they walked through the city centre. Both looked up at the steadily rising shape in the distance. No surprise why. The sooner we get to the Mudgate, the safer we'll be. Arya pulled the hood tighter over her head. The guards' presence was just as intimidating, though they were nearly all strange fuckers with shaved heads and chains draped over their loose shifts. A cluster of people was gathered at the old Sept of Baelor, newly decorated with a gold statue of King Joffrey. People of the realm, called out an older man in a dirty shift. We must give thanks to the great Golden King, God among men. The Seven sent him to this earth to bring us out of our wicked ways and toward enlightenment. It is through labour that we have salvation. It is through his generosity that we have hope. Old fool. More than that, Gendry. It's calculated. Joffrey's madness is getting more intricate. Arya spat on the ground. Very dangerous. They ducked down a side alley, only to notice a commotion up ahead. People were scrambling out of the way as if from a leper. Uh-oh. Being over 6 feet, Gendry saw it first. The glistening heads of soldiers. Sovereign guards. Hide! Grabbing Arya, he forced them into a deserted shop, nestling behind a heavy tarp. We can't make a sound. Arya clenched her teeth. One sound and the guards could ferret them out. Through a small rip in the tarp, she could see who was in the litter. Cersei. Her fists clenched around Needle's hilt. You'll get yours one day. Soon, however, they were gone, and Arya allowed herself to relax. And notice how close she and Gendry were. Her breath hitched. Before him was the girl that haunted his dreams for years. A Spitfire since they met. She still had that fire within her. A fire he found irresistible. Unable to fight it, Gendry quickly closed the distance with the she-wolf, locking their lips. It was chaste, but passionate. After a shocked moment, he could feel her meld into the kiss before she pulled away. Glancing down at the girl with a satisfied, happy grin, he noticed her shocked expression. Something wrong, Lady Stark? Something about the way he said the last, in a manner not at all for propriety's sake, made Arya blush bright red. Did I do something wrong? No, she said. Arya didn't want Gendry to think he had acted improperly. He had been her only rock in the storm for the years since her father's death. It's just... She bit her lip. I've never had one of those before. Oh. It was his turn to look a bit sheepish. The strong blacksmith with an uncertain look. It made Arya giggle. Jon and Sansa would be laughing their asses off right now if they could see this. Now that I think about it, I'd like to do it again sometime. Leaning on her tiptoes, she pecked him on the lips, making him grin again. But not until we're out of the hells out of this fucking city. He nodded. The sounds of marching echoed in the distance. The two of them melted back into the crowds of small folk. Resting atop the battlements, Jon enjoyed the moments of peace and quiet that he was rarely allowed to have. The twinkling stars of Azor Ahai's belt gazed down upon him in the moonless sky. Melisandre thinks I am Azor Ahai reborn. He mused. What do you think, girl? Curled up on his chest, Sansenya blinked at her father. I know. Doubtful. But then again, me being the true heir to the realm would have been doubtful as well. Hooting, the infant dragon basked in the warmth of the fire. Unable to produce flame themselves, the cold affected them more than their larger brother. Stroking her head, Jon wondered what Daenerys would think of him. Would she still love me, now that I am her nephew? He still loved her. God, he still loved her. Dany's silver hair and radiant smile haunted and blessed every dream of his. Gave him the strength to continue. I can only hope that she would. Brooding as always? Jon looked up to his right to see his sister, smirking. He grinned as she sat down next to him. Old habits are hard to break, aren't they? Clad in thick furs, she was no longer shivering. Bathed and well fed at Marjorie's orders. Sansa looked like a new woman. Aye. Jon's hand fed Sansenya a cube of meat. I'm sure we picked up more than one new habit on the way. Eyeing the orange dragon warily, Sansa sighed. I wish we had never left Winterfell. That father never left. She shuddered at her younger self's hopeless infatuation with Joffrey. I keep wanting to go back and scream, Don't go, you idiot! Jon chuckled. Things have definitely changed since then. Staring at the sky, then at the dragon, and back at the sky, Sansa reflected on everything she knew now. Of all the things I expected when I decided to come to Castle Black, finding Robb alive and you a Targaryen with 4 dragons was not among them. The sadness welled up in her that Jon wasn't her biological brother. I am sorry for the hurt you must have felt. It did hurt at first. The loving faces of his mother and father, both Ned and Rhaegar, comforted him, knowing that they loved him more than anything. He laughed grimly. You always used to say I wasn't your real brother. Now it's true. Grabbing his shoulder, Sansa looked Jon in the eye. You are my real brother, Jon. She pulled him into a hug, silently begging for him to believe her. I love you, brother. We will always be siblings, even if you happen to be the true king. Both laughed softly, that fact so profound it was amazing. A slight screech drew both of their attention. Looks like someone's feeling left out, Jon said. Chirping at her namesake, Sansenya leapt from Jon's shoulder to Sansa's. She is cute, once you're used to her, laughed Sansa, slowly reaching out with a finger to stroke the orange dragon's tiny head. Sansenya chirped once more, nuzzling the digit. You would think dragons would be of an ill temper. They are, with most. Jon had learnt the hard way for the most part. Rhaegal once nearly bit off Pip's hand before he had intervened. Sansenya is the most docile of the lot, though that is relative. If Davos hadn't had some of his fingers amputated. He trailed off. Sansa only laughed again, petting the dragon on the head. She was always the proudest and haughtiest, which is why I thought of you when I named her. Shut up! The two of them shared a grin, long dormant sibling bond finally emerging in full. In the break in their conversation, Sansa couldn't help but feel the regret and shame rise up. Jon, after father, and especially after we thought Robb, just the memories were too painful for her. Her raw soul open and vulnerable now she was in private with Jon. Jon understood. Their family had suffered so much since Joffrey. I always imagined a time would come where you would rescue me from that hell. You're smart, Sansa. You found your own way out. Not when I was that young. Tossing another cooked piece of meat for Sansenya, Jon patted Sansa's knee, comfortingly. I would have come, if I could. I know. She bit back tears. You were always such a good brother, loving us, even when I was such an ass to you. Sansa, we were children. Don't make excuses! The orange dragon cocked her head at her father and namesake, curious as to why they were arguing. I was terrible to you much of the time. Admit it. He chuckled at her determination. You were occasionally awful. Chewing on a skewered chunk of chicken, the memories of his brooding childhood returned. I mustn't have been that easy for you to relate to, with thinking I was a bastard and all. Even if you were, that didn't make it right. Arya, Robb, none cared. Mother should have been better. I should have been... Remembering the servants talking, the gossip between her and Jane Poole about him. And he was the true king the whole time. The best blood in the entire Seven Kingdoms. Valyrian nobility and northern royalty. And yet, he's still Jon. I'm sorry, Jon, for all of it. She placed her hand on his. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive. Forgive me. Jon smiled. All right, I forgive you. Leaning in, they pulled each other into a warm, filial hug. You remind me of father, just as stubborn and determined. She beamed at the praise. He may be your uncle, but you take after him greatly as well. You share his sense of honour and his bravery. Father was like that. So was Rhaegar Targaryen. The image of the proud, warm-hearted warrior came into his mind. It's still shocking, Sansa mused. The stories we were all told about Rhaegar and Aunt Lyanna were all lies. Her mouth curled into a scowl. Fucking Robert. Fucking Lannister. From what you've told Robb and me, Rhaegar was a good man. Nothing like Joffrey or Ramsay. Her mentioning the current occupant of Winterfell made Jon wince. The Curry's letter still crinkled in his pocket. Jon, what are you hiding from me? It's nothing. Don't lie to me, Jon. Resigned, Jon removed the rolled paper and broke the wax. Flayed man's seal. Sansa's breath hitched. That seal was completely recognisable. I received this early in the morning. I hadn't had the stomach to read it. Unfurling the letter, he began to read. To the traitor Jon Snow, bastard son of the usurper's dog. He looked puzzled at that line. Winterfell is mine. Bastard. Come and see. Your brother Rickon is in my dungeon. His breath hitched. Hand yourself, your dragon, to my king, and my bride back to me, and I will spare both your brothers, your men, the Tyrell whores, and your wildling lovers. Do not, and you will watch as I skin them all alive, as... Jon trailed off. Jon, it's just more of the same. Read it. Her firmness left no wiggle room. Gulping, Jon continued, wishing he could have Sansenya, Rhaella, and Daenerys disembowel him. As my men rape your sister over and over, as my dogs devour your brothers, then my king will turn your dragon against you. Bastard. Jon scoffed, as if Ramsay knew the truth. Sansa felt her blood boiling. From its perch on her back, Sansenya screeched, feeling the rage from her namesake. Signed, Ramsay Bolton, Lord of Winterfell, and had to King Viserys Targaryen, third of his name. Oh, that's just fucking perfect. Jon rolled his eyes. Of course, he has to show up. Raising an eyebrow, Sansa looked puzzled. You know him? The gears in her mind turned. When you were with father in Essos, you met Daenerys Targaryen and... Oh. Jon nodded. Yep, back when he was merely pretending to be king. We didn't hit it off. His sister's look clearly demanded an explanation. I sort of knocked him on his royal ass while sparring. Jon couldn't help but smirk at the memory. Blinking, Sansa's lips curled upward as a merry laugh left her mouth. The dragon chirped and leapt to the ground as she rocked in mirth. It had been so long since she felt even a bit carefree, and she loved her brother for giving it back to her. The tantrum following must have been quite amazing. It was, Jon laughed with her. And then, when I helped Daenerys, his sister, escape to Winterfell. Sansa's eyes bugged out of her head. Wait, the new maid? She was the Targaryen princess. Now everything was starting to make sense. Yes, he smiled fondly at the memories. When I helped her escape, she and I ended up burning Viserys' hand. Well, that explains a lot. Craning his neck around to see the grounds, a look of melancholy crossed over his face. What will we do? As long as Viserys and Ramsay have Winterfell, they can kill us all. It's obvious. We take it back. With what? Jon extended his hands. Much as I would like to go and tell the Boltons to pack up and leave, I don't have an army. Her eyes narrowed in determination. You have wildlings. Dragons. Rhaegal can't spit fire, and the others are mere hatchlings. He turned to Sansenya, barely the size of a small dog. Wildlings don't follow me. We can't attack Winterfell with the mere hundreds we have now, Sansa. Sansa stood. As long as Viserys can hold grandiose notions of being a king, and Ramsay hold Winterfell, we are not safe here. They are not safe. Winterfell is our home, Jon. Ours, and Robb's, and Arya's, and Bran's, and Rickon's, and Father's, and both of our mothers. We have to fight for it. Heart heavy, soul weary, Jon stood as well. I'm tired of fighting. Despite being a mere 21, his eyes looked decades older. I've killed men, monsters, women, even myself. I let the woman that I love with all my heart leave for the other side of the world, and I most likely will never see her again. All I want is peace, Sansa. Peace. Wordlessly, Sansa hugged him. So do I, Jon. So do I. The pair stood there, motionlessly for several moments. But if we do not fight, then we will never have it. Yours is the song of ice and fire. If I am the true king, he said finally, pulling back, then perhaps I should claim my birthright. Sansa's resulting grin matched the fire of her hair. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Oh ho ho ho! Battle of the Bastards coming up soon. And Sansa really becoming the true sister to Jon. I know we referenced it earlier, a couple of chapters back, but this is lovely. Her reunion with Jon, and especially her reunion with Robb, because she thought he was dead, and her reaction to the dragons. I might say the dragon's name's wrong a little bit. Well, at least Daenerys, because I've never heard that pronounced. Sansenya's easy enough, and especially Rhaella is easy as well. But hey, what can you do? And, well, yeah. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!